And the book that I have for us this week to dive into, and the topic, which I'm always open for suggestion on topics. Good morning, Pringles, Bianca. Oh, good morning, the crew. The topic really is like tending to yourself, which is the main point of this book. So welcome in to Mindful Monday. We're going to be diving into No Mud No Lotus. So if you struggle with tending to yourself, if you struggle with like sitting in your own suffering, it's a good one. Pringle said, I just drove through your part of the world again. The Pacific Northwest, Washington, that's where I am, Washington State. Bianca said, perfect, I'm having a tend to myself day. Well, this is a good one. No Mud No Lotus is, I don't know, I would say top 5 Thich Nhat Hanh books for me. Because, you know, a lot of my personal stuff has been because I just don't know how to be with myself, with my own suffering, with my own negative feelings, feeling insecure or scared. Those things are really hard to be with. Pringles said, had dad's service on Sunday. My heart aches for you, Pringles. I'm sending you love. This is a good one if you haven't read this one. Loss and grief are some of the hardest things I think that we walk through as humans. And this is a book that I always suggest for people who are walking through loss. So let's get into it. I'm starting early because I'm going to end early. I have a client right at 10 o'clock, which is why I'm in my office. Bianca asked, what was the website name that I get my books from? Not Amazon, thriftbooks.com, one word. And it's pretty quick shipping and very inexpensive books. So if you're like me and you consume a lot of books and you want to save money, thriftbooks.com is a really good one. Good morning, Alicia. The first chapter is called The Art of Transforming Suffering, which is a really, when I started learning about transforming suffering, I don't know, it was a hard concept for me to grasp because I didn't want to sit in the muck. I didn't want to sit in the suffering. That's why I used drugs and shopped and did all the things that I did to avoid the feelings within. And so, you know, mindfulness teaches us halt, relax, take a breath, and go back inward. And that's really scary. And so he has some really beautiful little excerpts that I'm going to share with you out of my little highlighted book, my anecdoted book, which I've given my family instructions that when I cross over to my next life, you better not sell my books. Keep them forever. Have like a library that people can, a free library or something. Anyway, this is out of The Art of Transforming Suffering is the name of the chapter. And this section is called No Mud No Lotus, which is the name of the book. Both suffering and happiness are made of organic nature, which means they are both transitory. They are always changing. The flower, when it wilts, becomes the composite. The composite helps grow the flower again. Happiness is also organic and impermanent by nature. It can become suffering, and suffering can become happiness again. If you look deeply into a flower, you see that a flower is only made of non-flower elements. In that flower, there is a cloud. Of course, we know that a cloud isn't a flower, but without a cloud, a flower cannot be. If there is no cloud, there is no rain, and the flower cannot grow. You don't have to be a dreamer to see that a cloud floating in a flower. It is really there. Sunlight is also there. Sunlight isn't flower, but without sunlight, no flower is possible. If we continue to look deeply into the flower, we see many other things like earth and the minerals. Without them, a flower cannot be. So, it's a fact that a flower is made up only of non-flower elements. A flower cannot be by herself alone. A flower can only interbe with everything else. You can't remove the sunlight, the soil, or the cloud from the flower. And he goes on to relate that how we can't have only, goodness within us. And he says, in our Plum Village practice centers around the world, we have a lotus pond. Everyone knows that we need to have mud for the lotuses to grow. The mud doesn't smell so good, but the lotus flower smells very good. If you don't have the mud, the lotus won't manifest. You can't grow lotus flowers on marble. Without mud, there can be no lotus. Without the suffering of life, without the hardships, there can be no happiness, which is it was a hard concept for me to digest. But he goes on to say, it is possible, of course, to get stuck in the mud of life. It is easy enough to notice mud all over you all the time. The hardest thing to practice is not allowing yourself to be overwhelmed by despair. When you're overwhelmed by despair, all you can see is suffering everywhere you look. You feel as if the worst thing is happening to you. But we must remember that suffering is a kind of mud that we need in order to generate joy and happiness. Without suffering, there is no happiness. So we shouldn't discriminate against the mud. We have to learn how to embrace and cradle our own suffering and the suffering of the world with a lot of tenderness. If you don't know about Thich Nhat Hanh was R.I.P., a Zen Buddhist monk who lived in Vietnam during the Vietnam War, and he did peace walks, mindful walking to try and bring peace. He was exiled from that country at one point. And so he talks about despair and suffering from a place of, true knowing. And that's why I love him so much. One of his teachings about embracing suffering is called saying hello. And that's the second chapter of this book, is saying hello to your suffering, to stop and acknowledge what's going on inside of you instead of bypassing or trying to rid that feeling, which is common. I love to not feel my feelings, especially the hard ones. They are heavy to hold and challenging to walk through. However, when I take the time to acknowledge the suffering within myself, when I take the time to stop and just allow it, the intensity fades out. So those really intense feelings from my childhood begin to fade away the more that I am with them. Pringle said, and they can be exhausting. Yes, very true. It is an exhausting process, which is why the tenderness aspect of mindfulness is very vital. To be tender and gentle with yourself while you're in the place of exploring, as well as when you're walking forward on your path. For me, sometimes I feel like I should be further along or whatever. And being tender to myself in the process is a part of helping with that. And he says, when suffering arises, the first thing to do is stop, to follow your breath and acknowledge it. Don't try to deny uncomfortable emotions or push them down. And this is a skill that I teach in most of my workshops, is to breathe in and acknowledge that your suffering is there, and then to breathe out and just say hello to whatever that emotion is, whether that's depression or anxiety, fear, hopelessness. Acknowledge that it exists inside of you, give it some space, and allow the intensity to begin to dissipate. I think that's the hardest part, is sitting through that peak of emotion and waiting for the dissipation. And mindful breathing is I think one of the most beneficial tools of mindfulness, and it's one that I use constantly, is just becoming aware of my breath, breathing in and following my breath all the way back into my body and bringing my awareness back inward versus on what's going on, whatever chaos is outside of me, or whatever chaos is going on in my head. You can redirect yourself by breathing inward, following your breath, acknowledging your experience, and just moving yourself through it. Hold on a second. The keys, thank you, oh my God. Appreciate you. The keys in my door. Hilarious. Not very mindful of me. That's crazy. I know. Well, it happens. I will tell you what, that I have been so spacey and scrambly, and I've had to pause a lot in my own life just to recalibrate. And I'm also a perfectionist, and so I fucking hate making mistakes. And so I'm working on letting that part of myself flow. And whatever part of yourself you're really hyper-focused on working on, it will show up in your life so much. And so the mistakes that I've been making are crazy. Ones I would normally never make. And I feel like that's a deepening of the self-acceptance piece. It's human. Somebody commented, it's human. And you're right, it is. And growing up in such a high-stress environment, I have to rewire that part of my brain, which is where mindful breathing comes in a lot to me. Where I can breathe in and acknowledge the whatever, acknowledge the heaviness, acknowledge the perfectionism, acknowledge the state of the world that feels insanely heavy and yuck, acknowledge that it exists, give it a little bit of space, and allow yourself a couple breaths. I always feel less anxious. I always feel less bound to whatever thought process I'm going through when I can just allow myself to be seen. And those energies are not pleasant, you know what I mean? The pains, the perfectionism and anger, fear, those are really unpleasant emotions to allow to arise. And this is what Tai has to say about that. Our pain is a kind of energy that is not pleasant. We fear that if we release our diversions and come back to ourselves, we'll be overwhelmed by the suffering, despair, anger, and loneliness inside, so we continue to run away. But if we don't have the time and willingness to take care of ourselves, how can we offer any genuine care to the people that we love? That's why the first practice is to stop running and to come home to our bodies and recognize our suffering. When we notice anger or anxiety come up, we can recognize these feelings of suffering. Suffering is one energy. Mindfulness is another energy that we can call upon to embrace the suffering. The practice of mindful breathing is essential because it provides us with the energy that we need for the other steps of taking care of our suffering. With mindful breathing, you can recognize the presence of a painful feeling, just like an older sibling greets a younger sibling. You can say, Hello, my suffering, I know you are there. In this way, the energy of mindfulness keeps us from being overwhelmed by painful feelings. We can even smile to our suffering and say, good morning, my pain, my sorrow, my fear. I see you. I am here. Don't worry. That's a really beautiful way to be with yourself if you have abandonment, stuff, if you're like me, and my inner being often feels very discarded, scared, abandoned. There's a lot of suffering that lives within my being that I've pushed down for years and decades. And the practice of tending to yourself is how you can heal those deeper wounds of abandonment. The more that you show up for yourself when you are scared, when you need someone the most, the more that you show up for yourself in those moments of need, the more that you can reinforce those feelings of worthiness, because you're showing up for yourself. Well, thank you. Someone said you're very calm to listen to. I try to put an energy of peace in the world. There's a lot of opposing energies to that. And I've made it my mission to bring a little joy, a little peace into the world. Thank you for the follow. Sometimes when it feels very overwhelming to me, especially fear of the unknown, fear of the future, when those feelings creep in, it's really important for me to acknowledge that they're there. Because when you further yourself from those feelings, you further yourself from yourself. You increase the disconnection from self. Thank you. And when you further the disconnection from self, you further the disconnection from other people. And that's why we're in the predicament that we're in. We're very far away from each other. And so, a lot of the basis of Thich Nhat Hanh's teaching was coming home to self so that we can extend those feelings outward to each other. And the first step is to embrace the suffering within, to not ignore it anymore, to give it space, to allow it to be. And I'll tell you from personal experience that giving my suffering space to be seen has softened me up immensely. Somebody commented 1 minute ago that I was soothing to listen to, but 10 years ago, I had so much anxiety and anger inside of me. I was like a ball of hatred. I punched holes in walls when I was mad. I yelled all the time. The center of my being was so sad. And when I started to acknowledge that place within and say, it's okay to be sad, it's okay to be angry, it started to ease. I started to soften. Soulshine said Ram Dass talks about how much we can learn from our own suffering. I love him so, so, so much. Ram Dass was one of the first teachers, him and Thich Nhat Hanh. Those are my beloveds. And I loved Ram Dass's story so much because he was a therapist and I was a counselor, not quite therapist level, just bachelor degree level counselor. Not to discredit myself, but I wasn't like a therapist. Anyway, and so I related a lot to being a clinician and then entering this journey of self-discovery because I chose the path to go inward, to look at what was going on inside of me that made me feel so angry. And turns out it was pain, it was suffering, it was sad. But when I gave that piece of myself space, when I went in, I've learned so much about myself and the world around me. And the deeper I go inward, the more that I embrace with curiosity the muck inside, the more I've transformed those feelings inside to better things. And now my life is really different. Compared to 15 years ago when I couldn't go an hour without drinking alcohol. I was heavily addicted to narcotics, and I thought that that was just the way that life was. Learning from ourselves on the mean streets of suffering, that's so good. That's such a good quote. You should write that down. And that's true. I learned from myself on the mean streets inside. But in embracing that suffering, by inviting the energy of mindfulness in, I wasn't just like, okay, I'm going to dive in and think about all the bad things that happened to me in childhood. No, I invited the energy of mindfulness in when I would breathe inward and those feelings would come up of childhood. I would also invite that energy of mindfulness in, just like Thich Nhat Hanh was talking about. Breathing in, I acknowledge the pain, and sometimes I would cry, and then I would envision myself as big me embracing little me, and that visual, which was a gift by Thich Nhat Hanh, of embracing these feelings like an infant with tenderness to cradle it, really changed my perception of those feelings, especially anger, because, anger is an ugly feeling. People don't like to see it. I don't like to see it. It feels yuck. And it has a violence to it. But really, we do violence to ourselves when we ignore how we feel. And so when you can acknowledge those deeper feelings of suffering within, you can offer yourself that tenderness that I was missing in my childhood. Bianca had mentioned Terence McKenna as an author to check out. Add that to your list. And Ty says, so the practice is not to fight or suppress the feeling, but rather to cradle it with a lot of tenderness. When a mother embraces her child, the energy of tenderness begins to penetrate the body of the child. Even if the mother doesn't understand at first while the child is suffering and needs some time to figure out what the difficulty is, just the act of her taking the child into her arms with tenderness can already bring relief. If we can recognize and cradle that suffering while we breathe mindfully, the relief is there already. And I can speak from personal experience with embracing that suffering within. Even very, very recently, as a teacher, I use all these things that I harp on my soapbox about. And I talk about them because I believe in them, and I use them all the time. And in December, I had an altercation with a close family member. It was very traumatic. Some things were said that were very hurtful, that touched my inner child, that felt very damaging to my inner being. And I normally, 10 years ago would have had a panic attack, maybe even 5 years ago. And I went into my room, I shut the door, and I laid on the floor, and I embraced my inner being, and I breathed very deeply, and I sobbed, and I said, hello, abandonment, I see you. Hello, suffering, I see you. Hello, deep wound, I see you. And I gave myself 10 minutes to just breathe. And the feeling started as a Mount Everest peak, a horrible feeling. I felt suffocated, like I was drowning. And then the more that I breathed into my being and I just acknowledged that it was a terrible feeling, I gave myself space and time and energy to feel. I visually cradled that place within. The feeling started to dissipate, and I was able to take a breath without crying. And within 15 or 20 minutes, my heart rate was back to normal and I felt calm. And I was able to journal about it and talk about it. And I made an appointment with, a energy worker to talk about it and work through it that way. I tended to myself in all of the ways that I teach people. And in that experience, it was very transformative because I gave myself the love and care that I would give my child or that I would give my best friend. I gave myself the love that I had always been reaching out for. And in that act, I put another brick on the relationship with myself, that safe space that I'm building, that relationship that I'm building with myself over the years. When I do those things for myself, when I am tender, when I'm loving, when I'm kind to myself, compassionate, those things are what help build the strong, loving relationship with myself. That's how I've learned how to trust my intuition. That's how I've learned to maintain my boundaries. When I say no, that means no. And that was just never true. Thank you for being here. I'm glad that you caught the live, and I always put these ones on YouTube when I'm done. So in a couple hours after I'm done teaching yoga, I'll upload this one to YouTube, which has been fun. I never posted hour-long videos on YouTube before, but always admired people who did. Bianca said boundaries are one of the highest forms of self-love. I agree. And I didn't know how to keep them, I didn't know how to do that until I started building that loving, trusting relationship with myself. And now I want to protect me. I strive to keep that place within safe. And so when I set a boundary, I usually follow through on it. I am known for having unshakable boundaries. And my daughter will tell you that if she says no, don't ask her again, girl. She's not changing her damn mind. Because, if it makes sense, I'll change my mind. But if it's a boundary thing, the answer is no. Soulshine said, I'm so proud of myself when I place a boundary and the result is better than I ever could have expected. Me too. I feel like that's the universe being like, you are supposed to stand up for yourself, so here's a reward. Good job saying no, here's a reward. I feel like that is our cue to the universe to keep doing that. Thich Nhat Hanh talks about being non-judgmental with those feelings inside too, especially with jealousy, anger, resentment. Those are feelings that sometimes when those pop up, we think, why would you think that? Allow yourself to exist without that judgment, and that can be really helpful for allowing your feelings to be there. Just let them be there. Placing the judgment on them, that self-critical, self-judgment piece. That's why we're so critical to people on the outside, is because we're very critical to the person on the inside. Those feelings of yuck, they're not bad. They're just feelings. They come and they go like any other feelings. And that's a big part of shadow work, and a lot of what I teach and help people understand is those shadow parts of self, they're not bad. They're not anything to get rid of. Those are parts of ourself that are crying out, begging for love, for attention, for care. Soulshine said, I'm a puppy ready to learn on this one. Me too. I'm open for messages, lessons. I feel like that openness is what came with mindfulness too, because I used to be so closed off. And I have something in my eyeball. It's probably hair from my little floofs over here. I woke up late because of daylight savings time, so I woke up an hour late. I'm an hour late to everything at this point. Daylight savings time is a hard one. And we have kids in our house, a baby in the house, my sister's baby, so the baby certainly doesn't understand that it's not 6 a.m. and then she went back to bed and then everybody went back to bed, and it was just like, wow, okay, everybody up, we gotta get ready. Okay, suffering with a hair in my eye, but it seems like we may have gotten it. We're reading out of No Mud No Lotus, which is a really small book too. It's very thin. It's very easy to read. It's 123 pages, nothing. And there are a huge section of it is practices. So there's a large breathing exercise. Breathing in, I am aware of my in-breath. Breathing out, I am aware of my out-breath. If you've ever heard me talk, I always talk about that. That's one of my go-tos. You can observe cravings also, if you're quitting nicotine or caffeine. This is your sign, Soulshine said. This book has been in my cart for a year. This is your sign to transfer that Amazon cart to thriftbooks.com and grab it. I think I got this one for $4 at Thrift Books. And it was a very good condition, and it was brand new, basically. I love this little portion that I marked where he talks about how to be happy. He said, the first method of creating joy and happiness is to cast off, to leave behind. There is a joy that comes from letting go. I should underline that. This one's my book, so I can write in it with my little highlighter. That's a good full moon. I know, I need them, Bianca said I'm going to tell everyone about that site. I need them to sponsor me. Thriftbooks.com, sponsor me, and I will buy all my books from you. I might already buy all my books from them. Many of us are bound to so many things. We believe that things are necessary for our survival, our security, and our happiness. But many of these things, more precisely, are beliefs about their utter necessity, are really obstacles to our joy and happiness. Ugh. Relate. Ooh, the library also has used books for sale, my library in Vancouver anyway, which is nice. We have a little while left on Mindful Monday. I'm gonna cut a couple minutes short because I have an appointment right at 10 o'clock. So I need to get the bed made. I just have my blanket on there. Do a little Reiki this morning. One way of taking care of our suffering is to invite a seed of the opposite nature to come up, as nothing exists without its opposite. If you have the seed of arrogance, you also have the seed of compassion. Every one of us has a seed of compassion. If you practice mindfulness of compassion every day, the seed of mindfulness in you will become very strong. I have talked about this several times about selective watering, about watering those seeds within. And I water those seeds of compassion, of mindfulness, of love. I water those seeds within by consuming things like this every day. I listen to podcasts like the Plum Village podcast, Be Here Now podcast, Jack Kornfield podcast. I take walks. Sometimes I just sit and close my eyes. I try to stay off of my phone doom scrolling. I try to embrace mindfulness and mindful being as much as I can to help those seeds within me grow, so that when I'm out in the world and things are not peaceful, things are not calm, things are not happy, that I still have access to those things within myself. And I do believe that those things are contagious. When we're joyful, when we're peaceful, and you interact with somebody, they feel that energy. People say that to me a lot. You are very calm. And that is because I practice mindfulness. And mindfulness is the energy of peace. It's the energy of calm. It's the energy of stillness. And in that energy of stillness, of calm, we can make better decisions. I really think that. I have been able to anyway. I wish that I could have like a movie reel of me 15 years ago, before practice, before any kind of inner work at all, because I was a fireball. And I was so angry. I was so full of the energy of suffering. I didn't know how to transform that yet. So it leaked out of me. Once I learned how to apply some of these skills like mindful breathing, mindful walking, it's spring now. You can go take a little mindful walk, breathe in, take a step, breathe out, take a step, breathe in, take a step. It looks a little silly, but it feels really good. I know. You know, like a little movie reel of, let me show you Jess outside of a strip club fighting a bush because I was intoxicated and dysregulated over God knows what. It feels like another lifetime, honestly, when I think about not even just my outward behavior of the past, but how it was inside of my head. The feelings that I felt, the self-hatred that I felt, the anxiety and inner turmoil that was always there. And now it's very floaty inside of my being. If I close my eyes and I settle my breath and I just allow things to settle, which I never was able to do before, it's like a leaf floating down a river. I follow my breath that way. And I honestly never thought that that was possible, ever, for somebody like me, somebody with a history of treatment-resistant depression and suicidal ideation and attempts and a diagnosis of CPTSD and anxiety, panic disorder. It was really hard to be in my body because a lot of terrible things have happened to me here. And I thought that that's just the way that it was. And Thich Nhat Hanh told me, you can find some stillness. It's just going to take time. And it did take time. But I think after 6 months, I felt a little ease. About 6 months. And, you know, I think a good rule of thumb, too, if you come from a traumatic background, is to remember that those things of the past are what brought you here. And the more that I sit with those events of the past, the feelings of the past, instead of hiding away or compartmentalizing them, the more that I sit with those things, the more that I have compassion for myself for going through that, and that compassion and love that I needed during that time, that support that I needed during the event, I can now offer that to myself as an adult, as a grown-up, as a stable and emotionally secure being. When those feelings of the past come up, I can breathe, acknowledge that they are a feeling from the past, abandonment from the past, and I can breathe in, acknowledge that part of myself that still aches in that way, and offer that part of myself love, compassion, friendliness, whatever it is that I need. I can offer that to myself in the moment so that I don't feel so trapped and suffocated by the past. Because when our energy is in the past, or our energy is in the future, our mind is preoccupied, we take away our consciousness from the now, which is the only space that we can cultivate happiness. So if your mind is constantly trapped in the past, happiness is not there. You will not be happy. If your mind is always trapped in the future, thinking about what could be, you will not find happiness there either. It's only now, here, right here. And your breath is a great way to bring yourself back into the now if you feel trapped in either thinking in the future or the past. To breathe in, come back here, so that you can generate that feeling of joy, of happiness, of gratitude, because it only exists here. Which is why I meditate so much. I'm always breathing, trying to be in the now, be here, because it is where I've found happiness, where I've found contentment. Even though I don't have a lot of money, I drive a very old, beat-up car. I struggle to pay my bills sometimes. My dad hates me. I don't know. My mom is weird. I shouldn't say my dad hates me. I have beef with my parents. I have family animosities. There's like a lot of stuff that would bring unhappiness to me, quote, quote, and has brought unhappiness to me in the past. But I've found this well of happiness within when I go inward and I can be with my inner being, when I can breathe and remember the things that are good. I can invite that seed of compassion, of mindfulness in, and it transforms the way that I feel. And that has brought me a lot of joy and a lot of happiness in life. The art of happiness is one of the last chapters in this book, out of a chapter called Happiness is Not an Individual Matter. The essence of our practice can be described as transforming suffering into happiness. It is not a complicated practice, but it requires us to cultivate mindfulness, concentration, and insight. It requires first that we all come home to ourselves, that we make peace with our suffering, treating it tenderly, and looking deeply at the roots of our pain. It requires us to let go of useless, unnecessary sufferings, release the second arrow, and take a closer look at our idea of happiness. Finally, it requires that we nourish happiness daily with acknowledgement and understanding and compassion for ourselves and those around us. We offer these practices to ourselves, to our loved ones, and to the larger community. This is the art of suffering and the art of happiness. With each breath, we ease suffering and generate joy. With each step, the flower of insight blooms. I love that so much. And then the second section is practices for happiness. So if you are looking for practices to go inward, there's really great breathing exercises. You can breathe in to observe things that you need to let go, and breathe out to let those things go. If you're dealing with, smoking or addictions that you're trying to deal with, you can breathe in and observe that craving, and then release that craving with your out breath. Acknowledge that it exists, give it space, give it time, and then let it go. And he was just talking about the art of letting go. The practice of letting go is how we get happy. Letting go of those feelings of resentment or whatever that is. Breathing in, acknowledging the hurt, and then breathing out to work to let that go. Those are really powerful practices of taking your power back. Because really, that's what I have felt is my power being taken from me when I allow myself to be trapped in the past, the sufferings of the past. I put all my power there. So take your power back by breathing into your body, into the now, giving yourself space, taking refuge in yourself. And he says you may find yourself in a negative environment that you can't get out of due to the realities of family needs or financial constraints. In that case, you can be a force for positive change. Start by creating your own safe harbor, even if it is only one corner of a room or a desk. There is also wholesome communities that you can join online, so don't give up hope. You can take refuge in yourself, even if the outside is chaotic. I started my meditation practice in the trenches of postpartum anxiety and depression with a newborn baby. I had no time or space to meditate, but I knew that I was suffering and I needed help, so I created space to meditate while I was doing the dishes, while I was folding laundry. I would just breathe into my body and acknowledge that I was breathing. I am breathing in, I am breathing out. Breathing in, I acknowledge that I'm very depressed. Breathing out, I am depressed. I would say that into myself. And it was helpful. It helped me to be more in my body when I felt like leaving my body. Because with anxiety and peaks of depression, you don't want to be in there. However, that is where you can build that peaceful center. And now that's where I go inward all the time when things feel very chaotic on the outside. I know that I can seek refuge inside, that I can be with myself in my being. And it's books like this that have really helped me transform those feelings of ache, of pain, of abandonment, of depression. It's helped me to transform those feelings into joy, into gratitude, into compassion for myself and for people around me. We were reading out of No Mud No Lotus today. For our shorter version of Mindful Monday, I took a Monday appointment, which I don't normally do. But it's one of my trades, and I love to see her. Another little piece of practices in this book that I want to talk about quickly is mantras. I know that's backwards for you, but mantras can be a really powerful way to be with yourself and to give yourself space. And so he has a couple that I'm going to share with you. The first is, I am here for you. I say this to myself a lot. I give myself, I embrace myself with a hand on my heart, a hand on my belly, and I say, I am here for you. Whenever I'm having those peaks of emotions, I feel horrible. I remind myself that I'm here for myself, to walk myself through whatever I'm going through. So a good mantra to be with yourself is simply, I am here for you. I am here for you. Reminding yourself that you're not going to abandon yourself. Which, if you have an abandonment wound, if you are plagued by that, reminding yourself that you're here for you can be a very powerful tool to help heal abandonment wounds. And another one that you can say is, I know you suffer and that's why I'm here for you. You can acknowledge that suffering. I know you're suffering and I'm here for you. Just giving yourself some space to be seen, to be felt, to be heard. You can acknowledge that your inner being is there. I know you are there, and that makes me happy. Even if the presence of your inner being is feeling unsafe or scared, acknowledging that that part of yourself is there is really powerful. You are partially right is another really beautiful mantra. Just validating your experience, your feelings. You are valid, you are partially right. There's truth in everything. Just acknowledging that you can have truth. That part of you is true. That's coming up. It's there for a reason. I think mantras are some of my favorite tools to use. Breathing and mantras are great ways to show up for yourself. If you're like me and you have some moments in life where you've been abandoned, showing up for yourself is a great way to do that. Thanks for the follow, Daisy. My Spanish is not very good, but I picked out a couple pieces of that. Thank you very much. Ooh, I did the translate button and my Spanish was better than I thought. I can read Spanish better than I can speak it. I don't even want to say how many years of Spanish. It's so embarrassing. But I took 4 years of Spanish, 2 years of high school, and 2 years of college level Spanish. So I can read Spanish okay, but I cannot pronounce anything because unfortunately I just can't, but I can read it okay. Hello, cousin. I hope you're having a good day too. This is another really good book that I would recommend to you, cousin, is No Mud No Lotus. It's a good one for just sitting with some of that anger, that pain, which is hard, but sitting with the suffering is how we level up, friends. That's how you get better, is by being in the muck. Just for a minute. And then you come on out. This will be on YouTube later. I appreciate everybody coming to Mindful Monday. We read out of No Mud No Lotus this week. I don't remember what I said we would read out of last week. I'm just kind of vibing with what I feel like on Mondays. So this Monday was No Mud No Lotus by Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh. Don't forget to check out my website. There's tons of free resources there. Workshops, courses, shadow work prompts. I still need to do a book recommendation list. Somebody wanted me to make a list of book recommendations, which I will put out eventually. And there's a link in my bio for the app. I have an app that I write in 6 days a week. I'm taking Sundays off, I think, because I just can't seem to execute doing anything on Sundays. But I put books, quotes, some shadow work prompts. You can have access to all the online courses through the app as well. It's a little easier to do the modules in the app than it is on the website. But all of that is there for you. Don't forget to like and subscribe, follow, share. I don't know, tell your friends. I am going to hit 10K on TikTok at the end of the month. I know the month is ticking down on me, but I feel like I can get 100 followers in a month. I got freaking 5,000 followers in a year, so anything is possible. Thank you all for being here for Mindful Monday. Have a beautiful rest of the day, and I will see you next week.